I was 28 years old when they gave me a company, 35 when they gave me a battalion, 42 when they gave me the regiment and taught me what command actually means, the 43rd Korathi Rifles. 11,000 men when we mustered at Korathi Prime's southern fortress monastery. I remember the smell of that parade ground, reclaimed ash from the volcanic flats, turned to dark sand that crunched under boot heels. The sound of 11,000 pairs of feet striking that sand in synchronized rhythm. The weight of the regimental colors in my hands during the consecration ceremony, silk so old the gold thread had oxidized to bronze in places. My fingers found those worn patches instinctively. Hundreds of officers before me had gripped the same spots. They told me I was inheriting a proud lineage. The 43rd had fought in the Margin Crusade, had held the line at Varos Gate, had earned commendations on 17 worlds whose names I committed to memory because that's what colonels do. We become archives of organizational honor. I learned the battle hymns. I memorized the roll of valor. I stood before those 11,000 men and told them we would add to that legacy. I believed it then. My family held minor nobility on Korathi, enough for the Schola Progenium to take interest when both parents died in a factorum collapse. I was 9. I remember the drill abbot's face when they came for me, the way he didn't ask permission, just presented the administrative transfer documentation to the magistrate. I remember my sister's hand pulling away from mine. She was 7. They told me her name 14 years later when I requested family status records. She died at 11 in the same factorum that killed our parents. Different collapse. Same structural deficiencies never repaired. The Schola taught me that individual loss was irrelevant against institutional continuity. I learned it well enough to graduate in the top percentile. Well enough to earn a guard commission instead of administration or clergy. Well enough to believe that the lesson was wisdom rather than anesthetic. I remember the temperature of my first battlefield. 31 degrees Celsius. Humidity at 70%. On a world whose name I've archived but no longer recall the feel of. What I remember is the heat inside my flak armor, the way sweat pooled in the small of my back, the specific quality of fear smell from the men around me, copper and salt, and something acidic that cut through the ozone from Laskan discharge. I remember ordering the advance. I remember men died. I remember we took the objective. They promoted me. That's how it begins. Success measured and objectives secured, casualties processed as acceptable percentages. I learned to read tactical displays, to translate the red icons representing squad-level annihilation into phrases like moderate resistance and expected attrition. I learned the vocabulary of command, which is primarily the vocabulary of conversion. Men into momentum, lives into terrain, human fragility into strategic advantage. By the time they gave me the 43rd, I'd converted approximately 4,300 individual soldiers into tactical outcomes. I knew this because I'd signed every casualty report personally. Some colonels delegated that duty. I maintained the practice of reading each name, each designation, each cause of death. I told myself this was respect, bearing witness to what command cost. I didn't understand yet that bearing witness without power to change outcomes is just elaborate record-keeping. The 43rd deployed to Vavia Secundus 8 months after I took command. Contested world, 3-way grinding fight between guard forces, orc incursion from the northern wastes, and something in the eastern hive complexes that the briefing documents referred to only as insurgent corruption requiring Ordo Hereticus oversight. We were assigned to the northern front, orc territory, straightforward by comparison. I met Major Hendrik Sorell during the troop transport jump. He'd transferred in from the 18th Korathi. Their regiment had been reduced to battalion strength during the Corellan suppression, then absorbed into other units rather than rebuilt. He was 37, compact build, premature gray at the temples, hands that were always still. That's what I noticed first. Every other officer had nervous energy, checking data slates, adjusting equipment, the small fidgeting movements of men managing fear. Sorell simply sat, hands resting on his knees, eyes half closed but aware, conserving energy like a machine in standby mode. "Major Sorell reporting, sir," he said when I approached. His voice had the flat effect of someone who'd learned to excise emotion from communication. Not cold, absent of temperature entirely. "Your file says you held the Sorell northern gate for 16 hours against mechanized assault," I said. 14 hours and 40 minutes, sir. The chronology in the after-action report was rounded for simplicity. "How many did you start with?" 270 men, sir." "How many at the end?" 31 combat effective, 19 wounded requiring evacuation, 12 unrecoverable. He recited it without inflection, without pride or shame or grief. Just data. I recognized the tone because I heard it in my own voice during casualty briefings. "I'm assigning you as regimental second," I said. "Your role is to ensure continuity of command if I'm killed, and to provide tactical redundancy during operations." "Understood, sir. Do you have opinions on command philosophy, Major?" He opened his eyes fully then, focused on me with an intensity that suggested genuine consideration of the question. "Men fight for 3 reasons, sir. Belief in the cause, fear of consequences for refusal, or trust in their officers. The Imperium provides the first 2. We provide the third. And if trust is misplaced, then we've failed our function, sir. But that's a command failure, not a soldier's failure. The men trust because that's what they're conditioned to do. We're conditioned to be worthy of it." I nodded, assigned him to the second's position formally. Spent the next 4 months learning that Hrik Sorell meant every word of that assessment with a literalism that bordered on theological conviction. He believed command was sacred trust. He believed officers who held men's lives bore proportional responsibility to expend those lives honorably. He believed the Imperium's war was terrible but necessary, that our suffering purchased something meaningful, that the machinery of military hierarchy existed to transform individual death into collective survival. He believed, I believed, the same things. Vavia Secundus took 11 months. We fought through orc positions with the standard guard methodology, massed lasgun fire, artillery preparation, armor support when available, accept casualties, and continue advancing. The 43rd performed adequately. We lost 2,300 men, acceptable for the campaign duration and intensity. I wrote the reports. Sorell countersigned them. We rebuilt with replacements from the Korathi tithe ships. Continued. I requested Sorell's permanent retention as regimental second, approved without question. We deployed to Guest IV 6 months later, then Margantia, then Halavar's world, 12 years of standard guard deployment cycle, combat, casualties, replenishment, transit, repeat. The 43rd maintained operational effectiveness. I maintained appropriate command presence. Sorell maintained the machinery of day-to-day regimental function with mechanical precision. We became synchronized. I would begin an order. He would complete the implementation before I finished speaking. I would identify a tactical problem. He would have 3 solution options prepared before the staff briefing. We developed the efficiency of long-term partnership, the kind of operational rhythm that looks like friendship, but is actually something more structural, interdependency. I knew his routine completely. He woke at 0430 every day regardless of circumstances. Spent 30 minutes in physical conditioning. Reviewed casualty reports from the previous day over recaf. Black, no additives. Temperature approximately 60 degrees Celsius because he let it cool while reading. He signed documents with his left hand, but fired his last pistol right-handed, compensation for a childhood injury he'd mentioned once and never referenced again. He had a sister on Korathi, wrote to her monthly, never received responses. Transit times made correspondence functionally impossible, but he maintained the practice anyway. Ritual as structural support. He trusted me completely. That's important to document. Hrik Sorell's trust wasn't blind faith or naive loyalty. He'd served long enough to recognize incompetent command. He'd watched officers waste men through stupidity, cowardice, or carelessness. He knew the difference between necessary sacrifice and negligent slaughter. He trusted me because I'd demonstrated competence, because I'd kept the 43rd operational through 8 campaigns, because I read the casualty reports and spoke the names and maintained the forms of command that suggested I valued what those deaths purchased. He trusted me because I'd never given him reason not to. I was 47 when they taught me what that trust was actually worth. The briefing came during transit to Holovar's world. Not the standard tactical briefing. This was restricted to senior command only. Myself, Sorell, and 3 other regimental commanders pulled into a sealed briefing room in the troopship's command sector. General Castor Venn, no relation to me despite the name. Tall, augmented left arm sleeved in red fabric to distinguish it from the uniform, voice like gravel processed through a Vox speaker. He'd commanded guard operations in the sector for 9 years. Successful by the standards that matter, objectives achieved, acceptable loss ratios, no catastrophic failures requiring commissariat intervention. Holovar's world, he began without preamble, activating the hololith display. Traitor forces have fortified the northern continent's primary hive complex. Intelligence estimates 15,000 enemy combatants, heavy weapons emplacements, void shield coverage over critical infrastructure. Trenches, bunkers, overlapping fields of fire. The kind of defensive network that would cost tens of thousands to crack, even with proper siege preparation. Our objective is to break their hold and reclaim the hive intact enough for Imperial administration. Mechanicus wants the forge complexes functional. Administratum wants the population centers salvageable. We cannot simply level it from orbit. Standard enough. Difficult, but standard. Then Castor did something I'd never seen in a tactical briefing. He deactivated the primary hololith and activated a second display. Different position entirely. Eastern continent, mountainous terrain, smaller fortified zone. This is the actual strategic target, he said. Enemy command and control, astropathic relay, ritual sites that Ordo Hereticus has designated primary threat. This position, he gestured to the eastern site, is what matters. This is what ends organized resistance on Halovar's world. His augmented hand opened and closed once, servo motors whining softly. The assault on the northern hive is a diversion, he said. A convincing diversion requires full commitment. Enemy intelligence is sophisticated. They will detect half measures. The northern assault must appear to be our primary effort. It must draw their strategic reserves. It must hold their attention while the actual strike force, he indicated new icons on the eastern position, inserts via low-orbit drop and eliminates command infrastructure. Silence in the briefing room. The kind of silence that has weight and texture. "How convincing must the diversion be, sir?" one of the other colonels asked. "Totally," Castor said. "Your men must believe they are conducting the primary assault. Your tactical posture must reflect genuine commitment to breakthrough. You will receive full artillery and armor support. You will advance with standard siege doctrine. You will take casualties consistent with a serious attempt to crack that position. You're asking us to lead our regiments into a meat grinder," another colonel said, while telling them it's the critical objective. "No," Castor said. "I'm ordering you to conduct a division strength assault on a fortified enemy position in support of strategic deception operations. The assault serves essential purpose. Without credible threat to the northern hive, the enemy retains reserves that would annihilate our actual strike force. Your attacks will save the operation. They will save Halovar's world. That is not deception. That is combined arms doctrine." "But the men won't know," I said. First words I'd spoken since the briefing began. Castor looked at me directly. "No, Colonel Venn, they won't. Because if they know, they'll fight like a diversion. Half-hearted, survivable. The enemy will recognize it immediately and redeploy. The actual assault will fail. Holovar's world remains in traitor hands. The sector destabilizes. Millions die instead of thousands. How many casualties are acceptable for the diversionary operation? I asked. As many as necessary to maintain credibility, Castro said. Intelligence suggests the Northern Hive can hold against sustained assault for 72 hours before ammunition and morale degrade significantly. You will assault for 72 hours. You will accept casualties. You will maintain operational tempo. On hour 73, the Eastern assault will have succeeded or failed. If successful, enemy command collapses and Northern resistance becomes disorganized. You exploit the confusion and take your objectives legitimately. If the Eastern assault fails, he paused, servo hand clenching, you continue until you break through or are combat ineffective. But intelligence indicates Eastern assault has 78% probability of success, which are excellent odds for this type of operation. And if we refuse? One colonel asked. You won't, Castor said. It wasn't a threat, just fact. Because you understand strategic necessity. Because you're guard officers who've already spent thousands of men buying smaller objectives than this. Because saying no now means admitting that every previous sacrifice in your career was acceptable, but this one crosses some invisible line you can't articulate. Where's the line, Colonel? What number of dead for what objective suddenly becomes unacceptable when everything before was fine? No one answered. You have 6 days until Planet 4, Castor said. Prepare your regiments for standard siege assault. Conduct briefings with appropriate tactical enthusiasm. Your men will believe because you will make them believe. Dismissed. The other colonels filed out. I remained, watching the hololith displays, the Northern Hive fortifications, the casualty projections scrolling in Administratum Cant at the bottom of the display. Estimated losses, 4060% over 72-hour operation. 40 to 60% of 11,000 men. 4,400 to 6,600 casualties. To make the performance convincing, you want to ask something, Colonel Venn, Castor said. Not a question. How do you give that order, sir? I asked. Not the tactical order, the other one. The one where you look at men who trust you and perform trust back at them while knowing their ammunition. Castor's augmented hand closed into a fist, held there. You do it because the alternative is worse. You do it because command means making decisions with imperfect information and living with the outcomes. You do it because the Imperium requires it and your personal feelings are irrelevant against strategic necessity. That's not an answer, sir. That's doctrine. Doctrine exists because the answer is unlivable without structure to support it, Castor said. You'll learn that. You'll give the orders. You'll watch them die. You'll accept the commendations afterward. And you'll do it again next campaign, because by then you'll understand that stopping, refusing, changing nothing, except making you feel morally superior while someone else does the necessary work. You're dismissed, Colonel. I returned to my quarters, sat in silence for approximately 40 minutes. Then I activated my personal data slate and began drafting the tactical briefing I would deliver to the 43rd Officer Corps. I wrote it as though I believed every word. The landing at Holovar's world was standard. Drop ships through atmospheric interference, anti-aircraft fire painting the sky orange and white. The sensation of falling that never quite stops even after you hit ground. The 43rd deployed with 11,200 men. We'd received replacements during transit. Fresh conscripts from Korathi, young men whose names I'd filed in the regimental archive without reading them individually this time. I told myself I'd read them on the casualty reports later. We had 4 days to prepare positions before the assault commenced. I conducted briefings with company commanders, battalion leaders, support staff, delivered the operational plan with appropriate conviction. Our objective: break through the Northern Hive's outer defensive ring, penetrate to the secondary fortification layer, establish positions for follow-on forces to exploit. Standard siege doctrine. Difficult but achievable. The kind of operation the 43rd had executed before. Sorell absorbed the briefing with his characteristic focus, already processing implementation details before I finished speaking. Artillery support will be critical for the first wave, he said, stylus moving across his data slate. We'll need sustained barrage on approach lanes for minimum 40 minutes before infantry advance. Armor should stage here, he indicated positions on the tactical display, with clear sight lines to enemy bunker complexes. Agreed, I said. Coordinate with Division Artillery Command. I want firing schedules synchronized to the minute. Casualty estimates, sir? I pulled up the data. The real data, not the secret projections from Castro's briefing. The numbers we would tell the men. 15 to 25% over the operation duration, I said. Heavy in the first assault wave, manageable for a position this fortified. Sorell nodded, making notes. 15 to 25%, between 1,600 and 2,700 men. Acceptable by the standards we'd operated under for 12 years. Not 40 to 60%, not the real cost. I looked at Hendrik Sorell's face, focused, calm, already planning how to minimize even the understated casualty projection, and performed trust back at him. We'll break them, I said. The 43rd has cracked harder positions. Yes, sir, Sorell said. He believed me. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in my cot in the command bunker and calculated. 11,200 men. 40 to 60% casualties meant 4,400 to 6,700 dead and wounded. Concentrated primarily in the first 48 hours when the assault would be most intense, most costly, most convincing to enemy observers. The men in the first wave, 2nd and 3rd battalions, our most experienced troops, would take devastating losses. Probably 50 to 70% casualties. Those battalions would effectively cease to exist as coherent fighting units. I knew this. General Castor knew this. Division Command knew this. The men in those battalions did not know this. I had 4 days to maintain the performance. To brief officers with enthusiasm that suggested genuine belief in breakthrough success. To inspect troops and offer encouragement appropriate to difficult but achievable operations. To conduct myself exactly as I had before every previous assault, so that no one, not the junior officers, not the veteran sergeants, not Hendrik Sorell, who knew my patterns better than anyone, would detect the difference. I'd spent 26 years in the Imperial Guard. I'd learned tactical doctrine, logistics coordination, strategic planning, small unit leadership. I'd learned to read terrain, enemy dispositions, supply requirements, casualty projections. No one had taught me theater. I learned it in 4 days. The first performance was breakfast with the officer corps on day 2 before the assault. 37 officers crowded into the command bunker's mess section, eating reconstituted protein and drinking bitter recaf. Standard pre-operation atmosphere, nervous energy, dark humor, the psychological preparation men do before they lead other men into fire. I entered at 0600, exactly on schedule, poured recaf, sat with the senior captains. Northern approaches look like hell, sir, Captain Darvish said. Open ground, limited cover overlapping fire lanes from enemy positions. That's why we're hitting it after 40 minutes of artillery preparation, I said. By the time our men advance, those bunkers will be rubble and the survivors will be too concussed to aim straight. And if the artillery doesn't crack them, then we adapt. Armor provides mobile cover. Infantry advances in company strength, mutually supporting. We've done this before, Captain. Veyros Gate was worse, and we broke that in 30 hours. I said it with confidence. Command certainty. The tone that suggests the speaker has analyzed all variables and determined success is probable. Darvish nodded, tension easing slightly. Other officers listened, absorbed the confidence, converted it into their own morale reinforcement. Sorell watched me from across the room. Not suspicion. Evaluation. Processing my affect against his long familiarity with my patterns. I maintained exactly the right level of concern, balanced with determination. Not cocky, not pessimistic, just competent command preparing for difficult work. His expression didn't change, but I saw the moment he completed his assessment and returned to his breakfast. I'd passed. Second performance. Inspection of 2nd Battalion, which would lead the first assault wave. I walked the trench lines with Sorell and the battalion commander, stopping to speak with squads at random. Standard pre-battle engagement. Where are you from? I asked a young private. Couldn't have been more than 19. Korathi Southern Habitation Block, sir. Factory District. Family? 3 brothers, sir. All tithed to different regiments. Haven't seen them in 4 years. You'll have stories to tell them when this crusade ends, I said. The 43rd's breaking through tomorrow. You'll be able to say you were in the first wave that cracked Halovar's northern fortress. The kid's face changed, pride replacing fear, or at least pride covering fear sufficiently to be functional. Yes, sir, he said. We'll make the regiment proud, sir. I know you will, I said. I moved to the next squad, repeated the performance 30 times over 2 hours. Each conversation slightly different, personalized to the individual soldier, but always delivering the same message. Tomorrow matters. Your sacrifice will achieve something. I believe in this operation, and therefore you can too. They believed because I performed belief convincingly. Sorell walked beside me through the entire inspection, occasionally adding his own words of encouragement. He was better at it than me, more natural, less theatrical. He genuinely believed. His confidence was real, which made it more effective. The men responded to him with the kind of trust that can't be faked. I envied him that. The ability to lead men into horror while genuinely believing the horror served purpose. Third performance. Final command briefing 12 hours before assault commencement. All officers, senior NCOs, attached support personnel. 60 men crowded into the command bunker's briefing room. I stood before the tactical display showing our objectives, our approach lanes, our expected timeline. Tomorrow we break their line, I began. The Northern Hive represents strategic importance to both enemy control of Halovar's world and our ability to reclaim this planet for the Imperium. What we do in the next 72 hours determines whether this world remains in traitor hands or returns to proper authority. I detailed the plan. Artillery preparation, armor support, infantry advance in echelon waves, objectives by hour. The display showed enemy positions, our attack vectors, the progressive advance through their defensive layers. Casualties will be significant, I said. You know this. Your men know this. That's the price of attacking a fortified position with prepared defenders. But the 43rd has paid this price before and emerged victorious. We will do so again. I paused, looked at each officer in sequence, made eye contact, held it, moved on, creating individual connection, personal investment. Your men trust you, I said. They trust that when you order them forward, it's for necessary cause. They trust that their deaths, if death comes, purchase something meaningful. Honor that trust. Lead them well. The Emperor watches, and so does history. Formal dismissal. Officers filed out with the appropriate mixture of determination and dread. Standard pre-assault psychology. Sorell remained after the others left. We stood in silence before the tactical display, watching the hololithic representation of 11,000 men preparing to advance into fire. It's a hard operation, sir, Sorell said quietly. Yes. The men are ready. 2nd Battalion especially. They'll break through or die trying. I know. We've prepared as well as possible. Artillery coordination is solid. Armor support is confirmed. Logistics are adequate. Command and control procedures are clear. He was working through his mental checklist, confirming all variables accounted for, finding reassurance in process. You've done excellent work, Hrik, I said, his first name. I rarely used it. The 43rd's performance tomorrow will validate years of training and leadership. Whatever the cost, the operation will succeed because of preparations you've implemented. He looked at me then, and something in his expression suggested he was about to say something significant, personal rather than professional. Sir, I want you to know. He stopped, reconsidered. The 43rd is the finest regiment I've served with. That's because of your command. The men trust you because you've earned it. Whatever happens tomorrow, that trust is justified. I should have said something. Should have found words that acknowledged what he was offering. Absolution, solidarity, whatever commanders share in the hours before men die on their orders. Instead, I said, "Get some rest, Major. Tomorrow requires us both functional." He nodded, saluted, left. I stood alone in the briefing room, watching the tactical display. 11,200 men, represented by icons and designations. In 12 hours, I would order them forward. In 72 hours, 40 to 60% would be casualties. The survivors would believe their sacrifice cracked the northern hive, never knowing they were ammunition expended to make the performance convincing. And I would maintain the performance until the end. During the assault, after the casualties, through the commendations and after-action reports. Because that's what the operation required. I'd become what the Imperium needed, an officer capable of converting trust into tactics, belief into casualties, human faith into strategic deception. The machinery of command had processed me as thoroughly as it processed the men who would die tomorrow. I just understood the conversion while it was happening. The artillery began at 0400. Earthshaker cannons, basilisks positioned in the rear staging areas, firing in coordinated sequence. The sound was physical, pressure waves that compressed the chest, made breathing require conscious effort. I stood in the command bunker's observation post, watching the northern hive's defensive line disappear under sustained bombardment. Explosions painted the pre-dawn darkness orange and white, flickering like a furnace. 40 minutes of sustained barrage. Shells impacting at 4-second intervals. 240 direct hits on bunker complexes, trench networks, fortified positions. Sufficient to crack rock rate, collapse tunnels, kill or concuss defenders caught in the open. The plan suggested this would degrade defensive effectiveness by 30 to 40%. The secret briefing had indicated enemy positions were reinforced beyond standard specifications. Bombardment would be impressive but insufficient. They would emerge bloodied but functional when our infantry advanced. I watched the bombardment and maintained appropriate command presence. Calm, focused, processing the tactical picture without emotional overlay. Sorell stood beside me, chronometer in hand, tracking the barrage timing against the planned schedule. "Artillery is performing to specification," he said. 37 minutes elapsed. Infantry is staged and ready. Armor reports prepared to advance on schedule. "Confirmed," I said. "Signal 2nd and 3rd Battalions. Advance in 3 minutes on my order." Sorell relayed the command. I watched the tactical display showing unit positions. 2nd Battalion, 1st wave, center approach lane. 3rd Battalion, 1st wave, left flank. Supporting elements staged for exploitation once breakthrough achieved. 4,400 men in the 1st wave. Statistical projection, 65% casualties in the first 2 hours. 2,860 men. I activated the regimental Vox channel. Opened communication to all battalion and company commanders simultaneously. "Soldiers of the 43rd Korathi," I said. My voice transmitted to 11,200 personal Vox beads, heard in trenches and staging areas across 3 kilometers of front. Today we break them. Today we demonstrate what the 43rd represents. Courage, skill, dedication to the Imperium's cause. The enemy believes their walls will protect them. We will prove otherwise. For Korathi, for the Emperor, advance and claim victory. Standard pre-assault declaration. I'd delivered similar speeches before. This time I listened to my own voice as though from outside. An observer evaluating the performance. I sounded convincing. The chronometer reached 0. I gave the order. All units, advance. 2nd and 3rd Battalions moved forward, 4,400 men emerging from staging trenches and advancing across open ground toward enemy positions. Standard Guard doctrine. Extended line formation, squad integrity maintained, officers leading from front, sergeants ensuring cohesion. Beautiful in its way. The synchronized movement of mass military formation, individual humans converted into organizational motion. The enemy held fire for 40 seconds, allowing our men to advance into optimal killing range. Then opened up with everything: heavy bolter fire from reinforced bunkers, autocannons from secondary positions, las fire from trench networks that should have been collapsed by artillery but remained functional, interlocking fields of fire turning the approach lanes into abattoirs. Men died, not dramatically. They simply stopped advancing, fell, disappeared into the dust and smoke. The formation continued forward because that's what guard formations do. Step over the dead, maintain momentum, trust that mass and determination will carry through where individual survival cannot. I watched it happen on the tactical display. Unit icons blinking as squad-level Vox beads stopped transmitting. Red indicators showing casualties accumulating. The 2nd Battalion's formation degrading from organized line to scattered elements, still advancing because they'd been ordered to advance. Sorell's face had frozen into absolute stillness. He was processing the casualty rate, comparing it against the projected 15 to 25%, watching the numbers climb past 30%, past 40%, still climbing. "Sir," he said quietly, "casualties are exceeding projection." "Enemy positions were more intact than artillery assessment suggested," I said. Calm, factual. The voice of command adapting to battlefield reality. "Order armor forward. Infantry requires mobile cover." Sorell relayed the command. Lehman Russ tanks advanced, providing some protection to surviving infantry elements. Casualties decreased slightly. Still catastrophic, but slightly less so. "2nd Battalion is combat ineffective," Sorell said, 15 minutes into the assault. His voice had gone entirely flat. 3rd Battalion at 60% strength. "They're not breaking through, sir. The defenses are too strong." "Continue assault," I said. "Commit 4th Battalion to reinforce 3rd. Concentrate on left flank approach." It was the correct tactical order. Reinforcing success, accepting that 2nd Battalion was spent, shifting weight to where breakthrough might still be achievable. Standard doctrine when initial assault encounters stronger than expected resistance. It was also theater, maintaining the performance that this was about breakthrough rather than attrition, that I was trying to win rather than trying to bleed. Convincingly, Sorell gave the orders. 4th Battalion advanced. Casualties accumulated. The assault continued for 8 hours on day 1. At hour 8, I ordered general withdrawal to staging positions for reorganization and resupply. Standard practice. Units cannot sustain continuous assault without rest, ammunition replenishment, casualty evacuation. The 43rd withdrew. What remained of the 43rd? Final casualty count for day 1, 3,470 men. 31% of regimental strength, 1,500 dead, 1,900 wounded, half of those requiring evacuation from combat zone. 2nd Battalion had ceased to exist as functional unit. 3rd and 4th Battalions reduced to 40% strength. I reviewed the data in the command bunker while Sorell coordinated casualty evacuation and ammunition resupply. Numbers on a data slate, names scrolling past too quickly to read individually. I archived the file for detailed review later, knowing I would never actually conduct that review. There were too many names now, too many faces I'd promised glory and delivered death. Sorell entered my planning area at hour 9. He looked older. The gray at his temples seemed to have spread in 8 hours, which was impossible but appeared true anyway. His hands, always still, had developed a tremor he was suppressing through conscious effort. "Casualty processing is complete, sir," he said. 4th Battalion can return to combat effectiveness with resupply. 3rd Battalion requires reinforcement from reserves before commitment. 2nd Battalion, he stopped. 2nd Battalion should be redesignated and rebuilt from scratch. There's nothing left to reorganize. "Noted," I said. "We resume assault at 0400 tomorrow. Artillery preparation begins at 0330. Commit 5th and 6th Battalions as first wave, 4th Battalion in support." "Sir," Today's casualties exceeded all projections. The enemy position is stronger than intelligence indicated. At current attrition rates, the regiment will be combat ineffective before we achieve breakthrough. Are you suggesting we withdraw from the operation, Major? I'm suggesting we request additional support before continuing the assault. If Division commits another regiment to this sector, we can... Division has allocated available forces, I said. The Northern Hive is our objective. We continue until breakthrough is achieved. Sir? Sorell's voice had changed, not insubordinate, pleading. 3,000 men died today. If we commit tomorrow with the same approach, we'll lose another 3,000. The 43rd will cease to exist. There has to be another approach. Flanking maneuver, siege tactics, anything other than repeated frontal assault against prepared defenses. I should have said something true then. Should have told him that the casualties were the point, that the assault wasn't about breakthrough, that his men were dying to maintain strategic deception. Should have shared the burden of complicity. Instead, I said, the 43rd has its orders, Major. We execute them. Prepare the battalions for tomorrow's assault. Hendrik Sorell looked at me for approximately 5 seconds. His expression cycled through confusion, anger, hurt, and finally settled into something worse. Doubt. Not doubt in the operation. Doubt in me. Yes, sir, he said, saluted, left. I sat alone in my planning area, surrounded by tactical displays showing unit positions and casualty projections. The hololithic icons representing thousands of men who would die tomorrow, believing their deaths purchased strategic victory. I'd just watched trust begin to crack, the foundation of everything Sorell believed about command and honor and purpose. He was starting to question whether I was competent, whether the operation made sense, whether the sacrifice served something beyond organizational momentum. He hadn't reached the truth yet. That would come later. But I'd seen the beginning of it in his face, the moment a faithful man starts wondering if his faith is justified. I could have stopped it then, could have told him the truth, shared the weight, let him understand that the horror had purpose, even if the purpose was ugly. I didn't, because sharing would compromise the operation, because Sorell's genuine belief maintained morale among officers who trusted him, and their belief maintained morale among men who trusted them. Because the machinery of deception required everyone play their role convincingly, and I'd been assigned the role of commanding officer who believed in the mission. So I maintained the performance. Day 2 began at 0330 with artillery preparation. 30 minutes this time. We couldn't sustain yesterday's ammunition expenditure without compromising division logistics. The bombardment was lighter, less effective, essentially performative, making noise to suggest we were still trying to soften enemy positions before infantry advance. 5th and 6th battalions advanced at 0400. The casualties were worse. Enemy had reinforced overnight, recognizing our assault as significant threat. Fresh troops, additional heavy weapons, improved fields of fire. Our men advanced into pre-sighted killing zones and died in even greater numbers than day 1. By hour 4, 5th Battalion was combat ineffective. By hour 6, 6th Battalion had collapsed. I committed the reserve battalion, 7th, our last intact formation, and watched it grind down to 40% strength in 90 minutes. Sorell stopped providing verbal reports. He simply updated the casualty data on the shared tactical display and continued coordinating what remained of regimental command structure. His face had gone beyond expression into something mask-like, protective disassociation, the psychological mechanism humans employ when processing unbearable reality. At hour 8, I ordered another general withdrawal. Day 2 casualties, 2,900 men. Total operation casualties after 48 hours, 6,370. 57% of the regiment. We'd exceeded even the secret projections. The 43rd Korathi Rifles had effectively ceased to exist as functional military formation. What remained were scattered companies, understrength platoons, ad hoc units built from survivors of destroyed battalions. We could field perhaps 3,000 combat-effective soldiers. Not enough to crack the northern hive, barely enough to hold defensive positions. I sat in my command bunker at hour 9, day 2, reviewing the casualty data. The names scrolled past. I didn't read them. Couldn't read them. There were too many. Somewhere in that list was the kid from Korathi factory districts who'd wanted to have stories to tell his brothers. Somewhere were the sergeants I'd known for 12 years. Somewhere were men who'd trusted me yesterday morning and died yesterday afternoon believing the trust was justified. Sorell entered without knocking, stood in the doorway, swaying slightly, blood on his uniform, not his own, transfer from wounded he'd helped evacuate. His hands were shaking visibly now, tremor he'd stopped trying to suppress. "Sir," he said, "I need to understand. Report, Major. Why are we dying?" Not asking for tactical clarification. Asking the fundamental question. This operation was supposed to cost 15 to 25% casualties. We're at 57% in 2 days. The approach isn't working. The intelligence was wrong. The objective is unachievable with current resources. And we're continuing anyway. I need to understand why. I looked at Hendrik Sorell, my second for 12 years, the man who trusted me completely, who'd believed command meant sacred responsibility to value the lives entrusted to our authority. I looked at his face and saw the moment before break, the last second before faith shatters. I could have told him the truth. Instead, I said, "We have our orders, Major. The Northern Hive must fall. Division Command has determined this operation is critical to planetary liberation. Our casualties, while significant, serve strategic necessity. We continue until breakthrough is achieved or we're relieved by follow-on forces." That's doctrine, sir. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have, Major. Sorell's expression did something I'd never seen. The mask cracked. Underneath was rage and grief and something that looked like betrayal. "You're killing them," he said quietly. "You're killing the 43rd. They trust you, and you're leading them into slaughter without even trying to find another approach. This isn't command, sir. This is—" He stopped, searching for words adequate to the horror. "I don't know what this is. This is war, Major. This is what the Imperium requires. If you can't function under current operational demands, I'll relieve you and assign someone who can." I said it cold. Command voice. The tone that ends discussion. Sorell stared at me. 5 seconds. 10. I watched him try to reconcile the person he'd believed I was with the person standing before him. Watched him fail. "Yes, sir," he finally said. "I'll prepare the battalions for tomorrow's assault." He left. I sat in silence, surrounded by casualty data, and felt something inside me finish the conversion process that had begun 4 days ago. Whatever remained of Matthias Venn, the person, had just been excised. What remained was Colonel Venn, the function, the commanding officer, the component in the machinery of strategic deception. I'd successfully destroyed the trust of the one person whose trust mattered. That meant the performance was working. Day 3 began at 0400, reduced artillery preparation. We were critically low on ammunition. The assault commenced with approximately 3,000 men, organized into improvised battalions built from survivors. Hendrik Sorell led them personally. I'd ordered him to remain in the command bunker, coordinating tactical support and communication. Standard role for Regimental Second, he'd refused, the only direct refusal in 12 years of service. "The men need to see command believes in this operation," he'd said. His voice was dead, affect completely flat. "If we're asking them to die, we should have the courage to die with them." Couldn't explain that his death would serve no purpose, that the operation was already successful, that we were hours from the moment when Eastern assault completed, and this nightmare could end. So I watched him walk to the staging trenches, las pistol in hand, moving like a man approaching execution. The assault lasted 6 hours. It was worse than the previous days because there were fewer men to absorb the casualties. Units dissolved faster. Command structure collapsed completely. What remained was individual soldiers advancing because retreat hadn't been ordered, dying because the enemy remained functional and they were not. Sorell's Vox bead transmitted for 4 hours and 17 minutes. I listened to him giving orders, encouraging men trying to maintain some semblance of tactical coherence as everything disintegrated around him. His voice stayed calm, professional. The performance of command leadership maintained even as the substance dissolved. At hour 4, I heard him say, "Second company, rally on my position. We're pushing through to..." Replaced by static, then silence as the Vox bead ceased transmission. I stared at the tactical display. Sorell's command icon had gone gray. Inactive status. Either his Vox bead was destroyed, or he was. I should have felt something. Grief, guilt, horror. The emotional response appropriate to losing someone I'd known for 12 years. Someone who'd trusted me. Someone I'd just killed through deliberate deception. Instead, I felt nothing. Just registered the data. Major Hendrik Sorell, killed in action, hour 4 of day 3 assault on Halavar's World Northern Hive Complex. I logged it, archived it, continued monitoring the tactical situation. At hour 6, new Vox traffic flooded the command channel. Eastern continent. The actual assault. They'd succeeded. Enemy command and control destroyed. Ritual sites eliminated. Traitor leadership dead or scattered. Resistance across Halavar's world was collapsing, including the Northern Hive. I ordered general advance. The 3,000 survivors of the 43rd pushed forward against suddenly disorganized defenses. Enemy forces, learning their command structure was gone, began surrendering or retreating. We took the outer defensive ring, penetrated to secondary fortifications, secured the objectives that 6,300 men had died trying to reach. We'd won. The diversionary assault had worked perfectly. Enemy attention and reserves had remained fixed on the Northern Hive for 72 hours. The Eastern assault had proceeded without significant opposition. Halavar's world was returning to Imperial control. The 43rd Korathi Rifles had successfully executed its mission. I filed the after-action report at hour 12, day 3. Total casualties, 6,847, 61% of regimental strength. Objectives achieved. Enemy position neutralized. Ready for reconstitution and next assignment. Commendation requests. I recommended medals for 17 officers killed in action. Mentioned Major Hendrik Sorell specifically. Demonstrated exceptional courage and leadership under fire. Personal example inspired men to continue assault despite catastrophic casualties. Killed, leading final assault that broke enemy resistance. All true, every word accurate, none of it mentioning that he died believing I'd wasted his men through incompetence or cowardice, that his last hours were spent watching everything he believed about command collapse. That I'd sent him to die without telling him the death served purpose. I submitted the report. Signed my name, Colonel Matthias Venn, Commanding Officer, 43rd Korathi Rifles. The General Castor called me to division headquarters 3 days later. Private meeting, just the two of us in his command bunker. "Excellent work, Colonel," he said. "The diversionary operation performed exactly as required. Enemy intelligence never detected the Eastern assault until too late. Your regiment's sacrifice saved the actual operation and secured Halavar's world. The sector command is extremely pleased. Thank you, sir. I'm recommending you for the Macarian Cross. Your leadership under difficult circumstances exemplifies the best of Guard Command. That's not necessary, sir. It's procedure, Colonel. Officers who execute operations this successfully receive appropriate recognition. You led your regiment through a difficult assault and achieved strategic objectives. That merits commendation." I looked at General Castor. His augmented hand was still resting on his desk. His face showed nothing beyond professional approval. "Sir," I said carefully, "I led 11,000 men into an assault I knew would kill most of them. I lied to my officers. I lied to my men. I maintained a performance of belief while knowing the operation was strategic theater. That's not leadership. I stopped. Because I didn't have words for what it was. That's command, Colonel, Castor said quietly. That's the decision you'll make again on the next world and the world after. Because the alternative, telling them the truth, results in operational failure and higher casualties. You did what was necessary. The fact that you understand the cost means you did it consciously, which is better than doing it through ignorance. Major Sorell died believing I'd wasted his men. Major Sorell died accomplishing a strategic objective. His belief about your competence is irrelevant against the outcome. Thousands more would have died if the Eastern assault had failed. Your deception prevented that. You made the correct choice. It doesn't feel correct, sir. It's not supposed to, Castor said. The moment it feels correct is the moment you've stopped being an officer and become something worse. You carry the weight. That's your burden. The men carry the dying. You carry the knowledge of what their dying purchased. He stood, extended his augmented hand. I shook it. The 43rd will receive priority reconstitution, he said. Replacement troops are already in transit from Korathi. You'll rebuild to full regimental strength within 6 months. Next deployment is scheduled for Vavia Secundus, Fortress World Assault. Similar operation profile. More fortified positions. More casualty projections. More performances to deliver, convincing men to die while believing their deaths mattered the way they thought they mattered. I saluted, returned to what remained of the 43rd. The reconstitution took 5 months. Fresh conscripts arrived from Korathi, young men who'd heard of the 43rd's glorious victory at Holovar's world, who volunteered specifically to join a regiment with such distinguished combat record. I processed them through intake, assigned them to reconstituted battalions, promoted survivors to fill the gaps in leadership structure. I never found Sorell's body. Casualty recovery teams had processed hundreds of corpses from the approach lanes where he'd died. Individual identification was impossible for many. He was listed as killed in action, body unrecovered, archived in the regimental roll of honor. I didn't write to his sister. Couldn't find words for what to say. Your brother died heroically was true but insufficient. Your brother died because I lied to him was true but forbidden. So I wrote nothing. Let the official casualty notification stand as the only testament. The new regimental second was Major Kelvin Thrace, transferred from the 9th Korathi. Competent officer, solid tactical mind, no prior relationship with me or the regiment. We worked together efficiently, professionally. He never asked about his predecessor. I never volunteered information. The 43rd deployed to Vavia Secundus 8 months after Holovar's world. Fortress World Assault. Heavily fortified enemy positions. Projected casualties, moderate to high. I received the operational briefing from General Castor 3 days before planetfall. Private meeting. Sealed briefing room. Vavia Secundus has 2 primary fortress complexes, he began. Activating the Holithus display. Western complex here, he indicated the position, appears to be enemy command center based on void shield strength and communication traffic. Eastern complex here is smaller but more heavily fortified. I already knew where this was going. The Western complex is a decoy, Castor said. Sophisticated one enemy has invested significant resources in making it appear critical. The actual command infrastructure is Eastern complex. Intelligence is 74% confident in this assessment. But not certain, I said. No. Which is why we're assaulting both simultaneously. Your regiment takes the Western complex. If intelligence is correct, resistance will be lighter than appearance suggests, and you'll secure objectives with acceptable casualties. If intelligence is wrong and Western is actually the command center, your assault becomes critical to the operation, rather than supporting action. And if we can't tell the difference, you assault with full commitment either way, Castor said. The men believe it's the primary objective. You command accordingly. If we're right about Eastern complex, Western falls easily and casualties are minimal. If we're wrong, your assault is legitimate and necessary. Either way, the operation succeeds. I reviewed the tactical data, analyzed the projections, found the section labeled Casualty Estimates if Intelligence Assessment is incorrect, 40 to 55%. You're asking me to do it again, I said. I'm asking you to command a regiment in combat operations against fortified positions, Castor said. Your personal feelings about tactical deception are irrelevant. Will you execute the operation, or do I need to assign another commander? I looked at him. His augmented hand was clenched, servo motors whining softly. I'll execute, sir, I said, because what else was there to say? That I'd learned the cost and couldn't pay it again. That would just result in my relief and another colonel learning the same lesson while the men died anyway. That refusing changed nothing except removing me from position to at least lead them competently within the constraints of the deception. I'd learned the truth about command. It doesn't matter if you understand. It doesn't matter if you object. The machinery continues. You can participate with awareness or be replaced by someone who participates without awareness. Those are the only options. I chose participation. The assault on Vavia Secundus commenced 4 days later. Intelligence was correct. Western complex was decoy. Resistance was lighter than projected. We took our objectives with 18% casualties, acceptable. The kind of losses we could absorb and continue. The men believed they'd struck the critical blow. I filed reports describing the operation as successful assault on enemy command infrastructure, recommended commendations for officers who'd led the advance. All theater, but convincing theater. General Castor awarded the 43rd a regimental citation for exceptional performance. I accepted it on behalf of the men, gave a speech about honor and sacrifice in the Emperor's glory. I'd gotten better at the performance. Over the next 6 years, I commanded the 43rd through 9 more campaigns. 3 involved similar strategic deceptions, assaults presented as primary operations but intended as diversions or probing attacks. The men never knew. The casualty rates varied, but averaged 32% across those 3 operations. I learned to identify the signs during operational briefings. The way General Castor's augmented hand would clench when explaining objectives. The careful phrasing that described operations as critical to sector control rather than decisive. The casualty projections that seemed slightly too high for the described tactical situation. I learned to nod, ask tactical questions, and prepare to perform belief for men who would die believing the performance was real. I got promoted. Colonel to senior colonel. Regimental command to battle group command. 3 regiments under my operational authority. More men to convert into strategic outcomes. Larger scale deceptions to execute. The last time I saw General Castor was at a sector command briefing, 16 years after Holovar's world. He was being reassigned to a different operational theater. His augmented arm had been replaced entirely. New model, more extensive, covering his entire left side. "You've done well, Colonel Venn," he said during the informal reception after the briefing. "Battle group command suits you. The sector has benefited from your tactical competence." "Thank you, sir." "Do you still think about Holovar's world?" he asked quietly. I considered lying, saying I'd moved past it, that I understood the necessity, that the weight had become manageable. Instead I said, "Every day, sir. Every time I give orders I know will kill men who trust me. Every time I perform confidence I don't feel. Every time I convert belief into casualties." Castor nodded slowly. "Good. The moment you stop thinking about it is the moment you've become something worse than what the Imperium requires. We need commanders who understand the cost, who carry the weight, who make the necessary choices while knowing they're terrible choices." "Is there any other kind of choice in the Guards, sir?" "No," Castor said. "There really isn't." He left for his new assignment. I returned to my command duties. The war continued. I am 61 now. Senior Colonel Matthias Venn, Battle Group Command, 39 years Guard Service. I command 8,000 men across 3 regiments. I will likely die in command, either killed in action or expired from age-related degradation before retirement is approved. I have killed approximately 47,000 men through the orders I've given over my career. That's counting only direct combat casualties attributable to operations under my command, not including deaths from disease, accidents, or enemy action I couldn't prevent. 47,000 men who trusted me. Some died believing their sacrifice was necessary and meaningful, which was true. Some died believing their sacrifice was necessary and meaningful, which was theater. I cannot remember anymore which operations were which. They blur together in my archive. Tactical briefings, casualty reports, commendations filed, performances delivered. I have received the Macarian Cross, the Honorifica Imperialis, the Star of Terror, and 6 campaign ribbons. My dress uniform displays more commendations than I can name without checking documentation. Each medal represents successful operations. Each successful operation represents acceptable casualties. Each acceptable casualty represents a man who died believing I valued his life appropriately. I do not know anymore if I did. The current operation is a standard Fortress World assault. 3 regimental battle group against fortified positions on Guest Ultima. Projected casualties, moderate. I received the tactical briefing yesterday, reviewed the operational plan, found no signs of strategic deception. This appears to be a legitimate assault where breakthrough is the actual objective. But I thought that about several operations that turned out to be diversions. I've learned that I cannot tell the difference until after, when the casualty reports file and the commendations arrive, and I understand what the deaths actually purchased.
So I will command this operation as though it matters. We'll deliver the briefings with appropriate conviction. We'll inspect the troops and tell them their sacrifice serves the Imperium. We'll order the assault and watch the casualty data accumulate and file the reports with steady hands. Because that's what I am now, not a commander who leads men. A function that converts men into outcomes, a component in the machinery of imperial warfare that processes human belief into strategic advantage. The Imperium taught me this, not through doctrine or training, but through the quiet moments after operations like Holovar's World, through the knowledge that objecting changes nothing, through the understanding that refusing simply results in replacement by another officer who will learn the same lessons while the men die anyway. I think about Hendrik Sorell sometimes. Not often. Allowing him into conscious thought compromises functionality. But sometimes, during the quiet hours between operational briefings and tactical planning, I remember his face during those final days, the way his faith cracked, the way he died believing I'd betrayed everything command was supposed to mean. He was right, but being right didn't change the outcome, didn't save the men, didn't prevent the operation's success. Just meant he died with clarity about what command actually was rather than dying with comfortable illusions intact. I don't know which is better. The assault on Guest Ultima commences in 6 hours. I will stand in my command bunker and watch men advance. We'll give orders that sound like I believe in breakthrough, as we'll maintain the performance that their deaths purchase something beyond the performance itself. Maybe this time it will be true. Maybe this time the assault is legitimate and the casualties will crack enemy positions and secure strategic objectives that matter beyond deception. Maybe this time I can lead men into death while genuinely believing the death serves purpose. I don't know anymore. But I'll deliver the performance anyway, because the performance is all that remains. The Imperium doesn't require that I believe, just that I command, with sufficient conviction that the men believe. That's the actual skill I've developed over 39 years. The ability to perform faith while feeling nothing, to convert my own emptiness into their courage, to stand before thousands of men and make them trust that their deaths will matter, regardless of whether I believe it myself. That's what it means to command a regiment that doesn't know they're a diversion, or to command a regiment that might not be a diversion, or to command a regiment when you can no longer tell the difference. The machinery continues, the war continues, the performance continues, I continue. Because stopping, refusing, breaking down, any response other than mechanical persistence would compromise operations and result in my replacement by another officer who will learn these lessons while men die teaching them. So I persist. I command. I convert trust into tactics and belief into casualties and human faith into whatever strategic outcomes the Imperium requires. I logged Hendrik Sorell's death as heroic sacrifice in service to strategic victory, filed the commendation, added his name to the regimental roll of honor, told the replacement troops that the 43rd had a proud legacy of courage under fire. All true. All theater. He died believing I'd betrayed him. Maybe I had, or maybe I'd executed necessary deception for strategic success, and his belief about betrayal was functionally irrelevant against the outcome. I can't tell anymore. The chronometer shows 5 hours and 47 minutes until assault commencement. I should review the tactical briefing again, should inspect the forward positions, should deliver pre-assault encouragement to battalion commanders, should perform the role of commanding officer who believes the deaths about to occur, serve meaningful purpose. I will, because that's what I am. Not Matthias Venn the person. He was processed out years ago, converted into component functionality. Now there's only Colonel Venn, the commanding officer, the function that takes men who trust and converts them into strategic outcomes. The Imperium is efficient that way. It doesn't waste anything. Not the men who die. Not the officers who lead them. Not even the trust that makes the dying possible. Everything serves. Everything converts. Everything feeds the machinery of eternal war, including me. Especially me. The assault begins in 5 hours and 43 minutes. The men are staged and ready. They trust me. They believe their deaths, if death comes, will matter. I will make sure they continue believing that until the moment they stop believing anything at all. That's what command means. That's what I've learned. That's what I'll carry until I join them in the casualty reports, my name filed in some archive. My death converted into acceptable loss against strategic necessity, another officer stepping into my position and learning these lessons while the machinery continues. The Emperor protects, they tell the men. The Emperor requires, they tell the officers. Both statements are true. Both serve the same function, converting human faith into imperial utility. I prepare to give the orders, to watch the casualties accumulate, to file the reports, to accept the commendations if we succeed, or the censure if we fail. To continue the performance until continuation is no longer possible. That's all there is. That's all there's ever been. The war is eternal. The machinery is eternal. The performance is eternal. I am temporary, disposable, functionally identical to every other colonel who stood in this position and made these choices and carried this weight. But while I remain functional, I will perform the role. Because that's what the Imperium requires, and what the Imperium requires, the Imperium receives. Always. The chronometer continues counting down. The men wait for orders. I prepare to give them. Again.